efficient tactic available.
Mm-hmm.
Those are very basically when it having a bias against anything that is basically in sort of effective in favor of things that are more like off tone, what you might call it, kind of tend to lead to like how would you like knowledge blocks or like experience blocks, and it makes it difficult for you to grow properly because you instead rely on like because like you may feel like you're basically trying to rely on like fundamentals that are supposed to be like stronger when you utilize a different sort of tank that's like not as popular or strong,
Uh,
but really in actuality you're just putting yourself in a situation where you won't learn how to play the game most effectively or efficiently as the others,
mm,
um, and you're kind of like growing only one part. Like it's good to basically know how to be flexible and into situations where switch into some unique situations where it might call for some sort of off where it might some call for some sort of off meta tank. um, but the thing you don't, but the thing you want to immediately get rid of in your mindset is, well, your bias towards anything, whether it would be something like off meta or it would be towards something like that is meta.
mm-hmm.
The only reason you probably should ever have a bias against something if it's boring. Like that's the only like good reason you can have it against. If it's fun, have fun with it, utilize it, abuse it. What you would call it. But yeah, so you don't want to end up like basically be feeling bored from like Double Barrier because Double Barrier is pretty fun. Back when I was playing the game a lot more, well, not that much, but playing it enough to experience Double Barrier quite a lot.
Mm.
Um, I also noticed that Sigma is a much more brawly character, and he focuses a lot more on combat potential. So he's basically like he's really fun. He's really fun to play. So don't have a bias. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The next thing is um basically be ready for whatever comes at you. Now that you're a team captain, you're about to go through a lot of hurdles. Tell me, what do you know about being a team captain so far? Like what do you expect to go what do you expect for what do you expect from somebody who would join a team? You know, like how would you do a recruiting process? How would you basically how would you like structure your team schedules? How would you structure your scrims so that way you have like an effective team where basically has like and some sort of consistency? Like what would you expect from first off recruiting a member? What would
Uh,
you want to see in them?
yeah, so in terms of recruiting, like it's been sorted out already in the sense of everybody in the Discord has kind of gone through a recruitment process because people wouldn't be in this Discord if they were, toxic or
Yeah,
inactive, not nice people, blah blah blah. So that's kind of been sorted
yeah,
itself out. But in regards to, let's say, the people who are on the scrim block now, I'm friends with all of them, to be honest. So I think with anybody, objectively speaking, regardless if they're my friends or not, as long as the team has the same kind of shared values and shared morals, that's a very important aspect of it. Because at the end of the day, yes, someone might be really, really talented, but if they're absolutely toxic or you just don't get along with them, I'd rather not have them on the team. But the people I have, quite fortunate, they are good at the game, and I get along with them really, really well. So that's one thing.
yeah,
In terms of like scheduling for blocks and stuff, it does depend because right now our Discord has every Thursday as a scrim day per se. Um, so that is definitely when scrims will happen. In terms of all other play days, just because obviously we got lives and stuff, it
yeah,
just depends on our own kind of individual rotors. But as it stands right now, I think the people in my scrim team they are quite oftenly online, bar one person, maybe two. But
yeah.
ideally, what I do is myself is when I find out when my missus is working a double or she's working in the evening, that's when I play the
Hmm.
game. I don't play when she's at home because I barely see her anyway. So
Yeah.
that would either be, let's say, Thursday for sure because me and Mrs. agreed upon that. Saturday for sure as well because she's working doubles anyway. So it's either going to be a Monday, Thursday, Saturday, and an odd day here or there, whether being a Tuesday or a Friday.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You actually have a pretty good structure going. I like that you have consistency in your scrims, and your practice because like having consistency is like the most important thing to have when you're trying to run a team or develop a team. Um, I would kind of say that maybe having a second day, like spotted out through another part of the week would be really nice too.
Mm.
because it would just kind of like it would improve the effectiveness of keeping that consistency, so that way people kind of like stay on track. You know, you're not kind of like going in cold every time. But like, how often do you scrim? How many days of the week do you scrim?
To scrim, we currently have 2 days in the month, so that's every Thursday. We're either internally in pugs. We just well, basically every Thursday is normally a pug or a scrim day. If no scrims are
Mm-hmm.
organized that day, we just internally have pugs within the Discord. But if there is scrims, typically depending upon our own admin in the Discord who looks to organize it, or potentially myself in the future, I'm not quite sure. But right now it's twice a month pugs or twice a month scrims.
Okay, I was talking about a week, but not a month.
Uh, just once a week then.
Okay, once a week. I see. All right. So if there's so basically, if you want to actually develop your team, you're going to need to. If you want to improve with your team, you're going to need to increase the hours at least by like maybe 3 days of scrimming,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe I don't know 2 days of scrimming, and then have like 1 day for review.
Mm.
So like at least you gotta at least have a team that is able to dedicate to like 3 days a week, scrims or review, either one, so that way they can at least have some sort of time.
Mm.
Or even like basically if you were to scrim and or maybe even like more days of the week you can have, but then you would like just scrim more shorter hours if you're not able to do more, So you
Right.
just got so that if you really do want to like commit to making this team and having it work and having it improve, and triple your scrim time or double it.
I think
It
like realistically, with the whole
yeah.
tripling and doubling and stuff, I don't know how viable it's going to be. Obviously, we'll look to play as much as we can, where we can dedicate at least 1 day to it. I know that you
Yeah.
mentioned consistency is important to build up, constant
Yeah.
improvement. So as a team, we'll try and play as best we can and potentially dedicate to 2 days in the week. So yeah, I'll think about the consistency in that kind of regards to increase the amount
Um,
of scrim time.
Yeah, so this is now regarding. So now we're gonna basically look back at the recruitment. Usually, when you look at people you're going to recruit for the team, like before you invite them into the server to go through trials and stuff in scrim blocks,
Mm.
you first look at their availability. First you got to see like you got to see how like similar your guys' schedules are. So like basically, are they more? Um, do they have Thursday? Okay, yes, they do. Do they have like say for instance, for example, you are sometimes available on Mondays or Saturdays. Then you look to see if they have like. Then you look for people who have similar schedules like that, like Mondays and Saturdays. Yeah. So to basically kind of like keep the scrim consistent, so that way you guys can like have more scrims throughout the week. So yeah, definitely an important part to look in through your recruitment process before inviting them into the server is making sure your schedules are more similar. The more varied your schedules are, the much more harder it's going to be to run the team.
No, of
I know
course.
because I went through this with my team with my old team back in what you call it dive meta, and more recent team. We're kind of my old recent team. We were struggling in the end of our Rose Cup tournament to like basically schedule a scrim. And because of that, since we weren't able to practice, we weren't able to refine ourselves enough to beat our opponent, and we kind of like lost the grand finals. But
Oh, shit.
sometimes you're just unlucky. But yeah, that's why preparation beforehand is important. Speaking of which, now we're going to the next topic. So this is basically another aspect in your mindset you need to have. Preparation is key. As Sun Tzu said, the battle is decided. No, the victory hold on. Sorry. The victor of the battle is decided before it begins.
Yeah.
This is basically talking about preparation. How well trained is your troops? How well supplied are they? Um, how how consistent are they? How consistent are they? Are they treated well? How much troops do you have? So now this is going into basically relating to Overwatch. How consistent is your players? What's their mindset? Are they toxic or not? Are they pretty skilled? Do they have growth potential in their play? Um, what are they active a lot? Do they have the same schedule as you so you guys can script more often? Are they reliable? Stuff like that. Very important in the recruitment process. But yeah, this is also not going even on to like basically scrim blocks because then eventually you're going to want to find yourself scrim partners who will have the same consistent day that you have, and you scrim them on that day, like all that every time of the week, you know?
Hmm.
So yeah. Uh, let's see. What else kind of preparation is good? Like, so basically, now that I talked about what kinds of preparation I thought of, what, do you have any preparation that you would like to share out to kind of like, get yourself more engaged in this topic?
In regards to preparation, for me
Yes.
personally, anyway, as kind of mentioned before in the messages before, where initially it was kind of like just me working on my individual play, because I think it's very important to be good at the individual hero. Hence why I've been just doing
Yes.
Zarya a lot. But in terms of the macro side of things,
Hmm.
like in game, I would like so there's a guy that one of my scrim partners or teammates mentioned to me called Egotistic Cat or something like that. He's an Overwatch YouTube guy. He's not like a massive YouTuber, but he's got some very good points regardless.
Yeah.
He talks about um, basic understanding of reading match. So reading team matchups in terms of team comps. Um, Objectively speaking, how would you read the game? Whether you're playing it more catching engage or engaging itself, changing play styles accordingly to each kind of team comp running against it, blah blah blah. So for me, in terms of my own macro individual leadership, I suppose recognizing the situation and making the right call on how to adjust towards that with some logical, rational thought process prior. Because the last thing for that, the one thing I hate about scrimming against a team which has like a comp where we're losing is thinking to myself, are we losing because of the team comp selection or we're losing because of the individual play? Because I'd rather us losing the individual play opposed to the team comp because of the fact that I misread it or wasn't quite sure if that was the right comp to run in the first place.
Well, you see, there is no like. To be honest, double barrier. Actually, is Orisa Hog good now? I don't know. I haven't been keeping up too well, but I do. Oh wait, no, Orisa Hog's not that good. Sigma's been made to take out Orisa Hog. Orisa. So double barrier is definitely a correct comp you guys should run a lot. Death Bowl is something that's like not too popular, but still run on Lijiang apparently. I mean, I see you diamonds run it, so it seems popular enough. I don't know. I haven't gotten too much into dive. Let's see.
Well, there's
Do you
suspect.
know the meta composition? Like basically the meta DPS tank and support combination.
Yeah, support is Mora Lucio, tanks, DPS is Doomfist, Reaper, and the tanks are Orisa Sigma.
Okay, good. You know that. So basically, if you're worried about like So if you're gonna basically start thinking about like wanting to make sure that individual play is the incorrect thing, then run that composition. Basically, first learn how to run that composition. First learn the basics of that composition and how to run it by default, and then and then while you're learning about maps, learn how you adapt to each map, how you can take advantage of each map, and also punish players for not playing correctly too.
Mm.
So say for instance you end up running into a mirror comp when they also have double barrier meta comp, and whatchamacallit, you see them not executing a certain basic, knowing how to punish that is very important too, and it's very rewarding.
Mm. No, that's what I'm
So
saying. Like as a like you recognize when they're making a mistake,
yeah.
and then kind of
Um
punishing that.
now I'll say this. Individual play is actually no. I'll say it like this. Team play and team comps are built off good individual play.
Mm.
That's what I'm going to say. If your players are not capable of executing like the most basics of their role, like the healer's doing a bad job at healing and like feeding a lot and throwing and dying a lot from players that aren't even like basically that good at DPS, then that's definitely something that needs to be worked on because it should not or say for instance like a Sigma isn't putting out enough damage. He's not getting his ultimate a lot. He only gets his ultimate like
Mm-hmm.
once or twice every round. Then your Sigma needs to work on how to be more effective. Same with the Orisa. So that's why when you're usually starting out a team, you want to first focus on like the individual play by having them run a standard composition that's like very meta, and then you develop basically their individualized play, so that way now they'll have a signature hero,
That
and
makes sense.
then what you call it, yeah, and then this is when you basically start developing a signature. Remember when I told you it's important to know how to flex sometimes?
Mm.
Well, not only is it important to know how, but it's also fun to learn because
Oh yeah.
because it includes all kinds of fun diversity. So there's usually when you recruit people, they're not going to probably be the most perfect person for you, but whatchamacallit, but they'll have a signature tank that probably might not be the actual meta. So say for instance, you end up recruiting a tank player who's like very strong at Winston and Reinhardt. Like he's an old school player. He likes the classic tanks. Whatchamacallit. And then he's basically now gonna have to learn how to play Sigma. And he's not that great at Sigma. What you want to do is you want to first, develop him on Sigma so he's able to fit into his individual play is able to fit well into your standard comp, and then once you guys have your standard comp like well developed and it's actually pretty decent, then you can start moving on to like, hey, now what if we try strategies like dive in this situation, like on this map, we'll execute this strategy that requires Winston and Diva,
Hmm.
so stuff like that. We're gonna like you're gonna utilize classic dive. So that's basically where whatchamacallit. So that's where basically you start developing your signature. Same for like supports. You might end up recruiting an let's see, what kind of main would they be? A Zen main. A Zen main in this meta, that's like probably torture for him. A Zen main. And he first needs to learn how to play, I don't know, Lucio or Moira. Next thing you know, he's pretty bad at them, but later on he gets better at it. Next thing you know, now he can start probably learning how to utilize his like Zenyatta hero for some sort of strategy. So that's basically like that's like the second phase of your team development is developing a signature. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, 100%. I think like I agree with the fact that if well, I've always wanted to just run one comp to understand how each piece fits into that comp and what their role is and stuff. Like you mentioned, like if the piece is not working, the machine is only as good as the sum of its parts. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It won't
I
be able to function
yeah,
properly.
exactly. And
It'll function like subpar.
like you said as well, like if we know, for example, let's say it's double barrier meta, and like you mentioned before, if Sigma's not building his ult up quick enough, you know, individually speaking, then that person needs to work on that to be able to improve upon it. But I
Exactly.
also
Yeah.
like the idea about it's kind of how I learnt my off tanks. I wasn't an off tank player. I was just literally just diva. But because I was recruited in my previous team as that off tank player, it got me,
Yeah.
you know, it made it fun for me to learn Zarya, Hog, and Diva as well.
Definitely looked like you were having fun. All right, so let's see. And now we're gonna get into a bit of a more serious topic. So, whenever you're in any sort of management position, having a bias towards anybody is usually never a good idea. The only like you should never have a bias towards anyone because when you're basically someone in a management position, is so you're gonna definitely have people who are gonna start to begin to act out. Okay, they're gonna lose themselves for a bit. They're gonna like lash out on somebody, or they're gonna like basically annoy someone, or someone's gonna like basically be picking on this person. The person doesn't like it, and he tells him to stop, but the other person doesn't.
Mm,
So you're gonna basically have to deal with situations like that where people are gonna start basically having sparks. People are gonna start sparking some shit between each other. So when that happens, um, usually what you first try to do, usually never take anyone's side. That's the number one thing. Never take anyone's side. As a manager or like as a team captain, you're the people you are sided with is with the entire team. Your job is to make sure that everybody is on each other's side and not against each other.
mm.
So that's the first thing you want to establish, that this is who you are and that you're not gonna like basically like look to anyone's side despite whether if they complain or bitch a lot. If they complain or bitch a lot, that's their problem. Um, and another thing is being able to resolve solutions. Uh, Sometimes you're gonna get people who are like basically gonna tilt really hard against each other, or they're gonna be like, "Dude, I really fucking hate this guy. He's so bad at this, and blah blah blah, this and that."
Yeah.
And next thing you know, yes, so you're like basically gonna have teammates talking shit about each other to another teammate, and it's fine if they talk shit about each other because really, what you may call it, if they have a complaint, at least the thing they're at least doing is they're able to find the mistakes. What you want to do is like say, okay, yes, I understand and I accept and I am aware. I accept your opinion. I'm aware of it, but instead of like basically beating this guy down with your judgment, how about we be more constructive? Like you want to make sure you want to what is it called? You want to promote constructive criticism and like demote anything that's like that will demolish someone's ego, or not ego, confidence. Also, another thing, do not let people develop egos, which we call it, letting them basically do whatever the hell they want. You know, it just leads to toxicity. Like we basically both know about that. Um, so yeah. And another thing, when someone starts acting out like very hard, or like basically someone's kind of like just or someone's just kind of being like slightly annoying but they don't know it,
Mm.
like sometimes people are going to make mistakes towards the team that's going to annoy others but they may not be aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to mildly intervene. Like first, do not is best do not intentionally embarrass that one player who is making a mistake accidentally in front of everybody, because then they're gonna feel bad that they weren't good enough or capable of realizing that mistake in the first place,
Yeah.
and then their confidence is just gonna be crushed,
Just
and they're gonna feel, yeah,
just don't
they're
throw
gonna
them
feel
under the bus, kind of thing.
exactly. When that if they start acting out like that, what you want to do is you want to pull them to the side, mildly intervene, and be like, "Hey, you're kind of doing this, and people are not liking that. Okay, can you like maybe calm down or chill a bit?"
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if they feel like they have something to share for the team that they feel like needs to be shared, or they feel like they see a genuine problem within the team, and they communicate it to you. It's always good to at least be open to being aware of whatever kind of problems your team will develop, as you start they because as you go through every scrim, you are constantly being tested. You're gonna every time you scrim, all the mistakes and all the errors and like what you may call it, the the in what's it called, inexperience, inability of experience, I don't know, something like that. Basically all of that's going to be shown to light, and the main thing you want your team to be prepared is for all of that to be shown. Like
Mm-hmm.
all of that's going to come out when you basically when you put them against like equally strong or more superior opponents, or quote unquote equal, opponents that should feel like it's a close battle but then sometimes end up rolling you. You got to prepare your team for that, because things are never going to be easy within the first month or week or so.
Yeah, because the previous team was we kind of had that the other day. We went up. It was like a last minute scrim thing. So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what SR they were. I think they were like only a little bit higher than us, but it was very obvious where like we concluded that the other team was better than us, but because of the fact that uh, our communication wasn't good, people had different kind of differences of opinion within the game, within the
Yeah.
match itself. Because of the fact the other team was so good, they really highlighted that miscommunication.
Yeah,
Um,
they did.
so yeah,
So when that does happen, do try to make sure that your team doesn't tilt too much, like make sure you keep them cool headed, keep that PMA, that positive mental attitude,
mm,
keep them upbeat, and like have them accept like it's like in a way like not like hammer it down and like beat them and make like, hey, you're fucking shit, but more like, hey, this is basically the level we're at. This is where we can grow. Now
mm,
that we can see what we're bad at, what we can do now is we can observe, we can learn, we can ask questions in case we don't know what the hell happened.
yeah, yeah,
Like basically, it's a more just be more prepared and try not to let your team get too negatively affected when they're failing that test, the
mm.
scrim block, and getting destroyed, because that's always inevitable.
Yeah. I think,
Um,
like, honestly speaking, despite the fact we lost, I think we did have a good reaction to it. Like, no one was blaming anybody about it. Obviously, you have these little squabbles in the match, which aren't said in any kind of like a malice kind of tone. It's just kind of like just saying what you're seeing. So I
Yeah.
think we are in a good position to learn from it. But for me, I know that personally, I know if we want to review our scrim blocks and stuff like that, when I look at a scrim game, I just look at it and stare at it, thinking to myself, what am I looking for?
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, so I mean, for me personally, even though we do organize these scrim blocks, I still want to learn from someone who's more experienced than I am, and I'd rather listen to someone who knows what they're talking about versus. I'm not saying people in my scrim don't know what they're talking about, but I mean, I like to take
But
it really from a.
they don't know too well what they're talking about as well as
Yeah, also kind of like from an external point of view as well, because like you said, there might be some biases that might happen. Not saying there would be, but by you going externally to someone else, it kind of almost removes that bias from the beginning.
yeah, yeah, definitely true. Because I'm gonna admit this. It is impossible for me to review my VODs because I try my best not to be biased, but I am way too emotionally weak to be able to handle like looking at my VODs and then just like not having the urge to blame my teammates. I have to like get out. I have to like literally ask somebody else, be like, "Hey, can you look at this for me and
Yeah.
see what went wrong here?"
Mm.
But the shitty part is that like they don't have the observation skills that I've been developing through the past year, and so they just say like all this weird. All they just say is just like this basic crap. I'm like this shit. Well, these guys didn't help at all. So it's not sometimes easy. I had to like pay for a coach. But
Mm.
yeah,
Hence what I'm doing with you now. So that's why I reached out.
yeah. Honestly, I'm glad you reached out. It feels great to be able to still what you call it, help people out and like get some experience teaching people about Overwatch.
That's cool.
Feels great. So now uh, back on the topic about keeping like having good management. Um, sorry, hold on. Let me just clear some thoughts. Things are going into my head. Um, oh, can't focus. Okay. Um, any questions for management that you might have? Like, do you feel like you understood any? Do you feel like you understood a lot of it, or do you feel like you would like me to talk more in depth about something?
Nah, to be honest, like in real life, I am a manager myself anyway of my own team. So I read a lot in terms of like mindset and how to manage people.
Yeah, that's
Like
great.
understanding the culture, being consistent, always looking to connect with the team, to show that you care for the
Yeah,
team, to communicate with the
yeah,
team. So I understand all that from there. So in terms of management, I feel quite competent in that area.
yeah, that's good. All right then. So now that I think we've taken care, I think most parts of aspects of the mindset that I can remember from the top of my head. I honestly should have been much more organized about this. I should have like spent the days before the session trying to prepare. Like I should have had a notebook in front of me and just write everything down
Oh,
through the
I
days.
only
But
spoke to
fuck,
you yesterday, so it's fine.
yeah, but I'm a lazy person. I had like 9 hours to think of things, so I had so much time,
Right.
but I didn't do any of it because yeah, I gotta take this a bit more seriously if I really want to If I really want to get like maximum, what you call it, improvement out of you. But yeah. So now we're gonna move on to the next thing I can remember off the top of my head. Let's see, team comps, right? Do I want to go into team comps yet? Yeah, let's go into team comps. All right. So, what's a good? How should I go about this? First off, I'm going to assess your knowledge
Hmm.
about what you know about the main meta double barrier composition. So I want you to tell me what you know so far about double barrier. How would you play it? Yeah, how would you play that composition?
Right.
What is the role of the tanks? What is the role of supports? And what is the role of the DPS?
Okay, so from what I know of with the double barrier is very oppressive in the sense that it blocks a lot of angles from main, and also Sim can block a lot of angles on like off angles. So in terms of Orisa, in terms of Sigma, their role is very much to gain ground, to make it more of a brawly situation, opposed to
Mm-hmm.
poke, because the DPSs don't really benefit from poke,
Yeah.
because of the fact that Orisa is poke orientated, generally speaking, but because of the composition that's in it, as in you've got your Doomfist, you've got your Reaper, you've got your
Mm-hmm.
Sigma, it changes her style to more brawly in that kind of sense.
Yeah.
Hence why, because of the team composition, the main tank's role is to get close to the enemy, to have the barriers up as long as possible, to block cooldowns from the enemy team, which hopefully
Mm-hmm.
will allow the DPSs to get picks off. From my understanding, a very good combination to have is a Orisa Holt followed by a Doomfist Punch, just because of the fact that it's unblockable, because Doomfist obviously can go through everything, and Holt almost guarantees a punch, whilst at the same
Mm-hmm.
time Reaper's going on the flank to pressure them from the back line to either get a pick or to cause so much attention onto him where he could potentially just Wraith form pass to the enemy team and almost like rinse and repeat that, where it's basically tanks stays exist for as long as possible. Orisa Holt comes in for Doofus punch to get a pick. Reaper goes in the back line to try and get a pick, and then that's it as a reset. And then Sigma, no sorry, and then Moira. Who did I say? Moira. Did I say
Oh,
Lucia?
actually, before you get onto supports, I would actually like to hear a lot more about Sigma before you move on to supports.
Okay.
Like, just tell me what you know.
In terms of that composition, use your shield to block off angles that might occur. Block certain particular cooldowns. Allow her himself and Orisa to almost cycle between shields, so that way the shield uptime's up for as long as possible.
Hmm.
That's what I know.
Okay.
And obviously
That's
using his
information.
primary fire to get as much splash damage done to get his ult up. That's my knowledge.
Okay, I see. Okay. Now you can go on to supports.
Supports, well, because they're brawling, it's very close. So Moira can obviously just pierce heal. She's got the ability to fade in and around barriers, no kind of issue from there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, her orb is not a blockable thing, so she gets, unless there's a diva, but in this meta there is no diva, so she can fire her healing orbs for free. Lucio, I would imagine, is just again adds the AO healing to make sure that he can boop things away, whether that being if it's a mirror matchup to boop the Reaper away, so he's not aggro, or alternatively to boop anything coming or looking to go through the front light shield, so that way it creates more space for almost like footsie. So that way the enemy
Yeah.
teams always having to walk past the shield.
Yeah. All right then. So wait, did you get into Lucio already?
Yeah, Lucio just to boop the Reaper or boop or basically to peel against the Reaper Doomfist or to create more space between the front line, so that way the shield uptime is up for longer and the enemy team can't walk past the shield as easily. But
Okay.
that last point is only a guesstimate.
All right then. So now that you basically told me everything that you know about your knowledge, have you just an important thing to do before every scrim block is to now clarify how you play the composition. Everything that you just mentioned, well, it may not be perfect. Like I said, nobody's perfect, and when you start out, a lot of mistakes can be shown. But when you basically talk to your teammates about how to play double barrier, always before your scrim starts, 10 minutes before the scrim starts, gather everyone together, talk about the rules of who's going to do what, how are they going to win, how are they going to peel, um, what do they think the enemy might do, and then how are they going to how are they going to think about combating that. So basically having more communication and more opinion shared across, because this is going to be 6 people sharing their opinion, so everybody's going to know something that someone might not,
Mm.
and so that way you guys will be more well-rounded. Of course, you guys are probably going to have a bit more. You guys might have some opinions that might, which we call it, uh, what's it called? They might like some opinions that you guys might have some opinions that just don't connect with each other and kind of like are more against each other.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm not really the best with words right now.
No, no, because I know we had an example in a scrim block a couple of days
Yeah.
ago where our support and our main tank had two differences of opinion. It wasn't like one was the right
Yeah.
call. Well, one in that situation, I wouldn't know what the right call was, or what the right call was, if he was right, he was wrong. But the fact there was such a difference in opinion led to the fight being lost anyway.
Yeah. So that's basically one thing you guys want to do. If you guys do come across that, basically pick a side.
Mm.
Now that I know it might be a bit like bit weird because then you're gonna basically it's like choosing someone's side over another, and that might sound like bias, but really it's about committing to a style of play.
Mm.
You can still like probably keep the other type of style of play in the back of a plan B option, but like your plan A, you want to make sure you have a plan. You want, like I said, when you're basically going to discuss before you're going to discuss everyone's role before the match, and you're basically going to have a plan. You're going to have a style of play. Everyone should know what to do and how to win and how to like not lose. The
Mm.
basics. After all, here's the basics of fighting: try to win, stop the enemy from winning. That's kind of like just that's like the absolute basics of the fight. So you always want to make sure that when you're playing in the game, you always want to know what's your role and how is that going to contribute to trying to win and how to stop the enemy from winning,
Mm.
whether you're support, DPS, or tank.
Yeah. And so you mentioned before with Mazaria, like just paying attention to the enemy DPSs, and if they do have a Reaper, whatever it might be, just think about who the threat is and how I can stop
Mm-hmm.
that threat from occurring.
Yeah, exactly. So now basically, so now would you like me to discuss some basics that I have learned about the double barrier in my like 30 minutes of analysis?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So pretty much this is what I got so far. When I was looking at when I was basically I was analyzing the game between New York Excelsior and San Francisco Shock on Lijiang Tower. So this is like a playoffs game. So it's pretty recent. I want to make sure I had up to date content. The first game, I was analyzing I was mainly analyzing the POVs of the Doomfist players and the Reaper players, but I
Okay.
still was able to get like a bird's eye view of kind of like how everything went down because I still kind of like watched the thing in bird's eye view before I watched the DPS. I wasn't able to watch it entirely, but basically what I learned in how people play that composition is that it's a very dynamic composition. It is also very flexible. And what I mean by flexible is it can adapt, but not only can it not only adapt, it can like what's it called? It can transpose. You know what transpose means?
Yeah.
Okay, good. It can transpose into a different situation. So basically, so this is what I mean. Doomfist has the ability to like flank. Reaper has the ability to flank, and not only that, Sigma has the ability to flank. Lucio, not really. Against a comp like that, he will get crushed, especially against Doomfist and Reaper. Versatile, dead. But what you call it? You have three people who have the ability to change their position. Two of them, the DPS, Reaper and Doomfist, can do it like basically in a very short amount of time. They can change their position very quickly, put themselves in the back line, or put themselves at an off angle. And then you got Sigma, who kind of like would do that a bit more slower, but he would be able to create he would be able to fortify some sort of off angle or some sort of ground that would create an advantage for his team. So basically, um, Sigma is very powerful in two situations. I find Sigma basically is good for basically trying to take down the front line and then like getting past the barriers to do damage to the players because you don't want to commit your Sigma too much to the damage, to damaging the shields unless there is a plan behind it. Like there is a clear intention behind destroying the barrier. Your Sigma's primary objective is usually your Sigma's usual primary objective is to basically shoot people with his balls. That's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you get some sort of accretion hits here and there. And with his shield, you want to establish like more closer ground because now since you have a Reaper and a Doomfist, they're gonna want to be like in people's faces. So having a Reaper, what should we call it? A Reaper with a barrier would be pretty nice, but not just a Reaper with a barrier. A Sigma in the team's face. Okay, well, it's not really good because a Sigma can just get rolled and smoked, but a Sigma supporting the Reaper by creating a by having a very strong presence and trying to get an off angle, because Sigma is very powerful at getting off angles. If he can get an off angle, he can put a barrier there, fortify that position, so if the enemy pays attention to him, he can like put a barrier right in front of him, still keep shooting, and the enemy would be forced to push him. Sigma has a bit of a kite type of play style, so like you don't want to be too far from the enemy, but you don't want to be too close, because Sigma's pretty it's a little weak at close range. He's more vulnerable since he's pretty squishy. Um, but having that medium range will allow you to still be effective with his balls.
Mm.
Um, and like help you charge up your ultimate a lot. And the barrier will help you take off angles and fortify ground much more. Of course, it's a little bit risky, but if you know what your risks are and you know what kinds of shitty situations you might fall in, then you'll know your limits as to like how much you can extend and how much you shouldn't. So Sigma usually wants to take an off angle. He wants to basically get into the back of the enemy. He wants to look for people to shoot and pressure from behind. Because if he can like if he can at least like land one direct hit on like a squishy, Doomfist Reaper can follow it up. And if the enemy team pays attention to Sigma and they try to push Sigma, they're gonna have there's remember an effective Sigma would be at medium range. So if the Sigma was playing correctly, they would have to walk that medium range, trying to close distance on Sigma, and like I said before, Sigma is a kiting play style. So he would also back up and try to kite the enemy, trying to grab as much attention from maybe just a few opponents as possible. So that way he can like basically split the enemy team.
Mm.
That's like one of the default objectives. That's like one of the more traditional styles of Sigma play, is to grab the attention of the enemy team and create pressure from an off angle. And it's been called, and that's where it benefits Reaper and Doomfist, because now less tension is on them while they're in the flank. It creates a bit more. It kind of like decreases the risk that Reaper would teleport behind somebody, and kind of like that it would decrease the risk that Reaper would teleport behind somebody and just immediately get focused on, because he's already been, because then there's a Sigma basically like having there's a Sigma on the off angle, like basically um oh, I am not good with words right now. What is wrong with me? Opposing uh
Almost taking
occupying the
attention
enemy
away.
team. He's pulling the attention away. He's occupying what the Sigma is doing for the Reaper who is flanking is he's occupying the enemy team's attention. Exactly. So that way it's less risky. So that way, instead of Reaper like going to deal with like 6 people in the back line behind 2 shields, he's gonna deal with maybe like one. He's gonna probably deal with like 4 or 5, because, and that's not only that, the Doomfist might be like basically pressuring people from the front line with the rest. Very important. And things are gonna like basically transpose into into a close range brawl, and that's what Reaper is gonna like. And Doomfist, yeah, he's gonna probably like that too. I mean, Doomfist is crazy strong. I'm still kind of learning Doomfist's role, but I'll get to Doomfist later.
Okay.
So yeah, that's basically how you play Sigma. You want to create, usually your default plan is to get an off angle, create threats with your balls, or try to get attention away from the team if they start trying to counter you. And if they don't counter you and instead focus on others, then you basically try to punish that by by basically having a more threatening presence. You know, kind of like now if they're not gonna face their shields to you, you want to basically shoot their squishes and kill them. You want to shoot their supports. You want to make those supports use up their survival abilities like Moira Fade uh or Moira Orb, and you want to make her use her abilities, or like Lucio Boot maybe. Like you want to make sure that you want to basically make it to where it's going to be hard for them to live if you're in the off angle. Or say for instance maybe even a Doomfist. So yeah, that's one of the ways how Sigma can be effective. The second way is now committing to the front line. Now, depending on the position, it will actually be unbeneficial. unbeneficial for your Orisa to be alone in the front line. Well, it's nice to have basically a pincer attack with a Sigma in the off angle and the DPS in a flank position. If the enemy team realizes that there is an isolated Orisa with basically only the support of the two players, and they can punish that easily by basically rushing that Orisa down very quickly, it can have it's a basically a blunder in the game, and it's very likely you'll lose a team fight.
Mm.
So basically, that's what you're risking when you're going to the off angle, and that's why sometimes you would see Sigmas play in the front line. What they would do in the front line is now they would basically have more of a peel style, a peel pressure, or more like peel setup. Now, because when a Sigma plays in the front line, he wants to play for a more longer brawl. He's trying to play the long game instead of a quick game. Because when a Sigma goes from an off angle, he tries to go for quick picks or quick threats to like he basically tries to go for a more riskier, deadlier position, much more explosive, a very explosive move that could just blow a lot of things out of proportion, create lots of chaos. That's what I mean by explosive. Whereas a Sigma who plays in front line would which we call it, would try to outplay the enemy, wear them down before they could wear him down, and basically he would basically keep trying to tap on that enemy until they eventually crack before he does, and then that's how a Sigma who plays the front line would win. Now, how that kind of happens, like I said, 30 minutes of observation, not the best, so I don't know how a Sigma does that.
Mm.
In my opinion, I am much more of a. In my opinion, don't be biased towards his opinion, and don't just copy this randomly. I prefer the Fran style of play of Sigma because of Fran. He loves to go for those flank plays. He loves to basically create pressure from the back and focus the enemy's attention towards him, especially if the enemy like doesn't have like two barriers. If they only have like one barrier, because a flanking Sigma, a flanking kiting Sigma on either attack or defense can like create a lot of pressure against the enemy team, especially if the enemy team who is defending has to like deal with not only one person from the front, but then sorry, not only has to deal with like people from the front line, but also a Sigma from the back line. Uh, it's just there's a lot of potential you could do with that position. It's still pretty punishable because you split your team and it creates a bit of isolation. And if the team can just like rush you down with Lucio speed boost, then yeah, it's pretty punishable. It just depends, but it also depends on how well you position yourself. There's a lot of complicated factors, but I do like the more dynamic position of where Sigma does a flank style.
Okay.
So yeah. Sorry I couldn't like tell you a lot about Sigma in the front line. I don't prefer that style. Like, yeah. Alright, next thing. Orisa. Orisa is how would I say this? Simple. She is simple in this. I thought there would be a bit more I thought there would be a bit more like nuances and more dynamics in when I would explain Orisa, but from the time and out but since I've been observing Orisa a lot, I've learned that Orisa is pretty simple. Basically, she has a role to fulfill. She's like the mercy player of the game. She fulfills her role. She makes sure she establishes space, fortifies some space. She wants to create pressure. Eventually, she'll want to close the distance between the enemy to now like create more chaos into the team and like play more of a brawl style since basically her entire team is brawl. She'll want to conserve the basics of Orisa is that you'll want to conserve your fortify as much as you possibly can towards the end of the fight, to the point of the breaking point of the fight, because things are gonna get more chaotic as it goes on, and the barrier is gonna go down pretty quickly. But the time when you that there's gonna be a point in your position where when you have to use fortify, let it be that when you do use fortify, that your Reaper is already in position and doing damage, and that your Doomfist is already in position and doing damage and getting picks. That you use your fortify
Mm.
because things are gonna get because not only that is gonna happen in their team, but it's gonna happen in your team too. Because Doomfist and Reaper are also gonna be in your backline trying to kill you guys usually.
Assuming it's a mirror matchup.
Yeah, assuming it's a mirror matchup.
Mm.
And if not, then it's just ability conservation. It's like how I said earlier with the Sigma. You want to create a pincer attack. You
Right.
want to surround the enemy team and make them crumble from only having one barrier, because one barrier is pretty shitty.
Mm.
Um. So yeah. Uh. Let's see how would I say this. Arisa usually wants to start out, but with a medium range. Uh, so in terms of like King of the Hill, Arisa would usually like to first make sure that she can get a shield onto the point. Like at maybe like it doesn't have to be like in middle or completely takes up the point. If it takes up the point, that's quite awesome because then you're basically holding the point from the enemy and you'll force the enemy to push into you. Um, but if you don't have that option available because a team won't let you, then the best you could possibly go for is at least getting the shield like somewhat onto point. What you want to do is you want to create a fortified ground or and eventually kind of like you basically want to destroy Orisa barrier or destroy Sigma barrier. Say for instance, it depends now. If the Sigma is playing frontline and your Sigma is playing off angle, what you want to do is you basically want to play a more uh not really assertive present, not really assertive, but more um how do what is tanky really a good word? Uh, conservative. I'll just say tanky. You want to have a bit. You want to play a bit more tanky, okay? You want to survive the damage. You want to survive the threats that's incoming, but you still want to kind of hold a presence enough to where you keep the enemy's attention on you. As Orisa, having you occupy at least the frontline Orisa, or maybe frontline, or maybe DPS even, that's very important because you don't want them to kind of like just go on you want to make sure that your teammates will be able to get their job done um but because you want to make sure that your teammates will be able to get the job done and that the enemy won't stop them because one, they're trying to deal with you first, and two, what you call it, you're just not dying. So say for instance the enemy plays aggressive, then you don't let them reward their aggression by falling to that. You basically try to play much more tanky, you try to play more survival. It's about you're just kind of keeping yourself up while your Sigma and your Reaper and Doomfist try to basically create a play. That's like how you play against aggression is you try to tank the aggression. And then for like say for instance, if the enemy starts to play more defensive, then that's when you kind of like start playing a bit more assertive because now they're going to try and defend against all threats, then you basically say that hey, since you're basically only committing like one person to me, then I'm going to overrun this one person that's only dealing with me here, and I'm going to take that. I'm gonna make that person scared of me and afraid of me. I'm gonna take that person out, so that way, what you call it, just in case your flankers, just in case one of your flankers go down or fail their flanking because they got overwhelmed by something or destroyed by something or punished. Um, you were able to assert a nice dominant presence to where now you have a good position. You have more threats around you. Uh, you probably have more abilities that's like you probably have more abilities that could like enable your teammates to like you're in a better position to where you could use your halt to get a better pull that would probably enable Doomfist, Sigma, or Reaper more.
So it's kind of
So
like
that's
if
my thing.
let's say if it's a neutral game where everybody's trying to do that whole rinse and repeat cycle between off angle Sigma, Doomfist Reaper, backline, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It should be as normal. But if they decide to say, right, we want to dedicate 5 members of our team to try and deal with the Reaper coming in the backline, because all 5 of
Yep.
those are trying to deal with that flanking pressure, it does then enable the Orisa, like you mentioned, to be more aggressive in the sense of, right, they're
Exactly.
not pressuring my shield, therefore I'm going to
Yes.
overrun this particular Orisa, and the Sigma
Yes.
they can push forward. Or alternatively, if they decide, right, cool, we're going to push this Orisa purely as a 6, it does mean then that the Sigma has a free game and Doomfist Reaper has a free game. So
Yep.
that's how you would play it, I guess. Well, that's what I'm interpreting from what you're saying to me.
Yep. Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly what I'm saying. So yeah. Um. Now I'm not sure what's the. They do have Lucio now that I do realize it. So Orisa would possibly get rushed down if Sigma was to go to an off angle. It just depends on kind of like how your team transposes. Because first off, if you can actually with your Sigma basically playing at an off angle, and your DPS either flanking or taking off angles. If the enemy team tries to rush you with their Lucio because you look isolated, you could set up a trap to where basically you commit their abilities, or where you commit them into a position where they're like nicely grouped together, or you basically pull them together. You what you do is you lead them into a nice group position, and basically have your Reaper and your Doomfist collapse in on them. Oh yeah, and your Sigma too. He gets in that where the enemy's barriers are focused towards you as the Orisa. The damage is basic. You got like Reaper trying to come in with like you got Reaper and Doomfist trying to come in for flank damage. Um, and when that happens, like your DPS are gonna come from these off angles, and then they're gonna basically start hitting the enemy from the back. So it's kind of like, how should I put this? I want to make a drawing of this. See if I can like bring out a pen, maybe, if I can. If not, then oh well. Okay, I can't. Oh well. I'll just use Q because Q is actually pretty good for this. So I'm just gonna like go on to a random video, and then I'm going to go live so I can get the drawing option because I like drawing. All right. I'm just gonna have you ignore what the picture is after I show it to you.
Sure.
All right. Like this. So this is the team. Arrow is where they're facing. Is where the weapons are. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to. Okay, I think this looks good enough. I think I can snap a picture of this. And then here you go. So what we observe in this picture right here, first off, there's a circle in the middle that's basically pink, and it has an arrow that faces towards the semicircle on the right,
Yeah.
which is moving back. The semicircle on the right is basically the core, you, Orisa, and either a DPS that's like playing frontline or a support that's playing like, and also usually the supports.
When we say you mean Sigma.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so depending on the situation, you would either have one or three flankers. And basically, that yellow spot that I like horribly colored in is basically the enemy's weak spot. Basically, that's what you want to do: is you want to lead the enemy into a trap. If they get too aggressive and they overextend, then you lead them into a trap to where you can basically strike them at their weak points. And if you can strike them at the weak points, which is basically the supports, or yeah, basically the supports, if your supports survive, uh, and you kill off their supports, basically you can put yourself into a nice long game of where you try to tank out, where you basically try to tank the enemy. Because you still have your supports, you still have your DPS, but they don't have support, so they don't have healing. All you gotta do is just like all you gotta do is just like wear them down, and then they'll die easy. It's really nice. So yeah. Um. So that's basically like one way how you could like handle such a play like that. So that's kind of like Orisa right there. Pretty, kind of like what I got so far. Um, pretty complicated. So stuff like that. Is there anything else with Orisa that I can remember? Nope, nothing I can remember. All right, next hero. Um, Reaper. Reaper, I'll be honest, I'm not too sure what Reaper really does. In my 30 minutes that I was looking at the New York Excelsior versus San Francisco Shock game, when I was looking at Striker and Sabiobi, was it Sabiobi? Yeah, it
Yeah.
was Sabiobi, I believe. They were both playing Reaper on Lijiang Tower, and I don't know whether to say if it was good or bad because they popped off only half the match. They didn't. They only looked like they had like silver. They only looked like they had silver eliminations and damage type of stats. So I'm not technically sure if they're like the main. Actually, no, they do look like it because Reaper doesn't have that much potential, but it does have potential in the backline. Okay, I think things are starting to come together. I'm starting to put together what Reaper really is. Reaper is more of a, how would you say it? A condition. Is that a good word? It sounds like a horrible word. That came out so much worse than that sound than I thunk it. Not a condition. No, Reaper's not a condition. He's more like a presence that needs to be respected.
Okay.
Reaper is somebody that if you want to be effective, he needs to have close range. Like that's the only way you can basically make Reaper effective. So whether your Reaper plays frontline or plays flank, it just completely depends. Your Reaper could change that in the middle of the fight. Usually, you would have your Reaper start out. You would usually have your Reaper first start out in the front line instead of immediately committing to the back line, because what you want to do is you want to help your Reaper wants to help your Orisa do as much damage to the barrier and help close as much distance and create a frontline presence. Because just in case, if their Reaper for some reason is busy flanking, then while that Reaper is flanking and your Reaper is playing the front line, your Orisa could enable the Reaper or your Sigma could enable the Reaper. Like anybody could enable the Reaper because all Reaper has to do is just teleport right behind that shield and he can do damage. And in that instance, while you guys are basically dealing with a 6v5, um, your Reaper could just your Reaper could just like run into the enemy's faces because there's no Reaper to stop him. Okay, well actually no, there's a Doomfist Sigma to stop him, but like that can easily be dealt with just what you call it, with basically pocket heals, Sigma barrier, and then like counter damage. Also even Sigma, what's it called? Sigma suck. What do people call it nowadays? I remember we call it
Grasp.
suck. We call it what?
Grasp. Well, I know the ability is called. Can you say
Grasp.
grasp?
That's right. Well, that still sounds fucking gay. First we call it the suck. Now we call it the grasp.
I don't know
Man,
what they
this
call it.
Sigma true. Honestly, I don't know why Blizzard didn't make Sigma gay. He literally sounds like the most gayest character ever. Throws balls at people. Fucking used to be called the suck. Now it's renamed to grasp. What else?
Might be
Gravitic
suck.
flux.
Might be
Okay, you
suck
know
to
what?
be
That's the
fair.
only.
I don't know, yeah, but
The only thing that doesn't sound gay is his ultimate. But then again, people are probably gonna make that sound gay eventually. So you know, I'm having my I'm waiting for it. But yeah, so while I'm off topic and done ranting about Sigma being gay, um, yeah, so usually you want to have your Reaper first kind of like start out in the front line so he can help enable the front, so he can help Orisa out and he can help Orisa out with the front line so she can be a bit more effective in the more longer game. And in case like what we call it, and probably even in a shorter game, he can like have a nice tactic available for like rushing the enemy in case somebody's off on a flank, because flanks are risky in terms of like you put your team in a 5v6 situation for a temporary amount of time until you engage the enemy, and then like you might put them in the 5v6 situation again if you have to like back out from the flank. So yeah. What was I gonna get on again? Um, so just starting out, that's what you want to have in Reaper. Next thing is, what are good targets for Reaper? Uh, Tanks are usually good targets for the Reaper, actually. Sigma and Doomfist, not really the best targets. Usually, those are the targets you kind of want to like be wary of, like because Sigma has accretion. Sigma has accretion, which is a pretty powerful ability against Reaper if Reaper doesn't have Wraith. Um, and especially if Reaper doesn't have Wraith, because usually Reaper would use his Wraith to enable his combat abilities. Like I see a lot of Reapers do that. I even seen Striker and Sabiobi use that. But they would like use it more like in the end. They would use it more later in the fight. Like Tibiobi and Striker would never use it so early. So if you see a Reaper using like Wraith very early in the fight, tell your Reaper to like hold that Wraith till like later on because that's not good.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more
Don't
of a
want
cleanup, I guess, just to close distance.
not really to clean up, but more like as a plan B. Because like I said, things are gonna get more hectic, and when things are gonna get more hectic throughout the fight, and if you don't have your like powerful abilities around that time, you're more susceptible to losing. And if your Reaper somehow just gets forced out of Wraith and he needs like help,
Mm.
make sure you help your Reaper. Don't let him die.
Right.
Never let your friends die. Um, let's see what else. I'm trying to remember. Yeah. So make sure your Reaper is always enabled into the front. Your Reaper, the another thing that since your Reaper is not that powerful, he still is very. But since your Reaper is not that powerful at long range, but he's still powerful at close range. Usually, you would kind of have your Reaper like as more of an offensive presence. If anything, the only time he would usually flank is if your Reaper is going to go for a play. If your Reaper is going for a flank play, or if he's taking an off angle, he's going to go for a play. Your Reaper would usually play the front line because your Reaper more likely wants to play the more longer game. He wants to play the long game where he outplays opponent, wears them down, then tears them to shreds when they don't have anything to defend themselves with. Whereas your what's it called? Your Doomfist now. I think we covered Reaper well. No, did we cover Reaper well? Tell me how much do you understand about Reaper? Would you like to know anything more about him?
Well, I just for me, like the way I like researched briefly on YouTube in regards to what he does, just the cycle of him going into the back line, tries to get a play. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. He gets Wraith spawn back to the to his team and then plays their frontline presence. And then when his abilities are back online, he then just teleports again to the back line, rinse and repeat. So he'll either exists in the back line to try and get a pick. If that doesn't work out, he then uses Wraith form to get back into the front line and back and forth from there. So in my head, wouldn't Reaper want to go for the supports opposed to the tanks?
Oh, everybody wants to go for the supports. Like of course, as opposed to the tanks. The thing though is that Reaper can put a ton of damage into the tank. It just depends. Like if your Reaper is really good at aiming, if your Reaper is decent at aiming and he can hit squishes consistently, kill the supports. Two shot him, one shot him, two shot him, get him out of there, and then get your Reaper back into safety. If they have one less support and you can wear them down, easy. You'll win the fight. Um, let's see. Now, read now. Now there are going to be times when your Reaper won't be able to flank or play, and he'll only be able to play in the front line. When that does happen, um, this is where you start basically when your Reaper is trying to play the front line, your Reaper also plays a defensive aspect in your team composition. So say for instance a Doomfist or a Reaper comes into your back line, your Reaper if he's not occupied with trying to go make a play or something, he now serves a defensive aspect of where he doesn't want he doesn't want to let the flankers execute their flank potential. So if there's a Reaper in the back line, your Reaper tries to drive that Reaper off, maybe off to a health pack, if anything. Because if the enemy Reaper has to back away, which we call it out of the fight and not to his healers, that Reaper is going to be forced to go to a health pack. And while that Reaper is doing the health pack, he's inactive in the fight. He's inactive while the fight's going on. And so you guys are basically up for 65 temporarily. Same thing with a Doomfist. If the Doomfist commits to a Reaper, the Doomfist is an idiot. Because if the Reaper is good, he's going to have Wraith. Now say for instance the Doomfist doesn't commit to the Reaper and commits for a more reasonable target, like the supports or the tanks. Reaper is there to basically not let that is to basically really punish that Doomfist for trying to commit so hard. So say for instance the Doomfist like gets a lot of damage into the tanks, pulls out a full all-out abilities combo, right click, slam, uppercut, and he's got like shots in between every single ability. while he's doing all of that, your Reaper has the potential to shoot that Doomfist down, because like I said, Reaper plays defensive aspect. You don't want to let the DPS in the backline get what they want. You want to stop them from doing that. This even counts like sometimes towards Sigma, but if against a Sigma, so say for instance you come against a flanking Sigma, um, usually you do want to zone that Sigma away. At least get him to a point where now he kind of becomes a little bit inactive. He can't real a Sigma who is at an off angle, is a pretty hard. It's like pretty difficult to. It's pretty difficult to keep him out of the fight because he can always just come back in or retreat to his team. But yeah, let's see. So yeah, the Reaper definitely does play a defensive aspect. Now, Doomfist on the other hand, Doomfist is a fun guy, but he's also the most annoying character on that composition. If you're like a tank, I swear, Doomfist be Doomfist. If a Doom here's a tactic against Doomfist. If a Doomfist tries to right click into your team, and your Doomfist is with your buddies, make sure your Doomfist right clicks the hell out of that. Make sure Doomfist counter right clicks the other Doomfist, so that way if the other Doomfist is like stunned, immediate punish and immediate 65, easy game.
As in right click, as in rocket punch.
Yes, rocket punch. Yes, because whatchamacallit, I saw this play where Striker actually tried to. No, not Striker. It was Libero. Yeah, I think it was Libero. Libero basically tried to right click into the enemy team to get a nice cheeky pick. But Striker there, no, not Striker. What's his name? Sinatra. Sinatra got a nice no.
I even
What's his
say
name?
Doomfist, Sinatra.
Yeah, yeah. Sinatra was basically positioned correctly because Sinatra was nicely positioned to counter any sort of play the enemy was going to make. Because Sinatra was fine with like not going for an immediate offensive push. He was basically fine with like, oh yeah, Doomfist. This what we call it. Just in case Doomfist tries to pull a cheeky play while we all turn a corner and while we're getting to point, I'll be there to stop that and punish the Doomfist by stunning him with a right click. Um, well, basically putting us both on the ground. So that's actually a really cool play that Sinatra did, is that he stunned the Doomfist. And the team was able to easily follow up. Sadly, they lost that fight though for some reason I can't remember. But yeah, so that's a nice tactic game pool. Another thing, so now basically get into the basics with Doomfist. Brawl the hell out. I know that sounds so basic and so stupid, but that's only because I had 30 minutes of observation. But yeah, that's what I basically know so far. Brawl the hell out, be effective with their combos. Doomfist is the basics of Doomfist's game sense is like the basics of Doomfist's game sense and positioning is like, well, make sure you're in a position to where you can get a nice flank or off angle off. You want to be able to be in the backline, do tons of pressure, and kill the enemy team. But you also want to be effective in your combos. That when you do execute your combos, that first you always, if you're gonna start out with a right click, what you would call it. Usually you can start with a tap right click, do an E. Actually, no, that uses a lot of abilities, but usually in between every ability that you're like hitting somebody with, make sure to add a left click in between. Left clicks should never be left out. Like if you see a Doomfist doing his combos, he should always be left clicking all the time because every time he doesn't left click, that's like missed out damage. Your Doomfist can be much more deadlier than that. That's the one thing I know. Your Doomfist is usually gonna want to go for high ground too, whether on defensive or offensive positions. Like, because then he'll be able to have more options available to him. Like he'll be able to have a nice lock on E. He'll be able to do a nice unlocked E. Sorry, seismic slam. He'll be able to do a nice locked on slam, or he'll be able to do a nice unlocked slam and getting him like tons of DPS where he like bashes into the back line. So yeah. What else? Usually when your Doomfist executes a combo, he should always have like one ability saved for escaping. Your Doomfist should never commit into an enemy team backline without having a right click or an E to get out of the fight, so that way he can regenerate his abilities. Because Doomfist is basically a he's a hit and run character. He's like in and out. He gets in, does his job, and then he gets out,
Mm.
making sure he's at least alive. That's like the basics of Doomfist that I know. So if you don't see your Doomfist doing that, you see him just using every single ability. Your Doomfist better at least have 2 kills by then. That's the only time your Doomfist should do that. There should be 2 good players too, because a Doomfist is extremely valuable in the fight. If your Doomfist is throwing, you guys are more likely to lose the fight. But
Mm.
if your Doomfist is not throwing, you guys are more likely to win the fight. So having a good Doomfist is very important. Uh, Usually Doomfist also combos a lot with Orisa's ability. Some targets to be aware when you are Doomfist is Sigma, Accretion, and Orisa Pull. Because Orisa is technically a counter to Doomfist. Like the counter was made before the counter got in. Like that's Orisa was literally made to like stop Doomfist in his tracks and doing what he usually wants mainly. Well, like if Doomfist was to go against Orisa, but against other players, yeah, Doomfist can kind of like I would say Orisa's not the best PO character, but Doomfist should definitely watch out for Sigma if he has a creation, and if he doesn't, then Doomfist can definitely probably go for Sigma if Sigma isn't focusing him, because Sigma can still like 4 shot a Doomfist, or like I would say 2 shot since it's like 2 balls each. So yeah, uh, that's pretty much all I got for Doomfist. Pretty brawly character. Moira, pretty basic too. The main job for Moira is to charge up Coalescence very quickly. Like most, apparently, hearing this note from from Chronodota's analysis on goats, not goats, from Double Barrier. Uh, he basically said that usually most team fights are determined by whether which Moira can get their coalesce first.
Mm.
Because when you're in a brawl comp, you're gonna be doing lots of healing, and I mean lots of healing. It's crazy. So yeah, you usually, as Moira, you want to focus on your effectiveness to the composition, because because your Moira, while she is gonna be spending a lot of time healing, since Moira is meta now, the basics of Moira is that you always want to constantly be getting your ultimate as fast as you possibly can, whether you're doing damage or you're doing healing. If you can do both at the same time, and that increases your output, and that increases your ultimate charge output to get your ultimate quicker, then do it. If you're not healing anybody and you don't need to heal anybody, throw out a damage orb. Look for people to right click. Even and when you feel like you're starting to get low on your healing meter, always look for a chance to right click people like 100% of the time. If you're able to heal somebody, which we call it, if you don't need to heal somebody in the moment and you're like at half you're at half HP meter, then spend your time trying to get that HP meter back up before you need to start using healing again. And Moira is very quick to change between both damaging and healing. If anything, the only thing that damage is really used for is just charging ultimate. Like the only time you would ever use Moira to kill somebody is if you have your orb, and you're comboing it onto like onto maybe like some sort of DPS support or anything. But a
Mm.
lot of people are tanking in the game, so it's very unlikely that you're going to use orb and right click to like basically go for picks. If anything, just as Moira, stick to your basic role. Put out tons of healing. Make sure that when you're not healing, that you're doing right clicks and you're trying to charge coalescence as fast as possible. You want to always keep yourself occupied in the game. There should never be a time where you're standing around doing nothing, because you might as well just basically leave the game for that period of time, you know? So yeah. Um don't waste your orbs as Moira. Always prioritize using your left clicks usually, and then when you feel like you're at like half when you're at half uh HP meter for your left clicks, or your left click heals, that's when you kind of like start maybe using your orb. You usually want to save your orb for survivability, but if you feel like as Moira that you're not being threatened, that's when you can be more aggressive, charging up your coalescence in other ways, like AKA damage, like I was mentioning earlier. So yeah. Um, trying to remember everything. And don't if you do not ever use fade aggressively. I think that's pretty basic and obvious. I know it's pretty obvious, but it should still be stated because it's that bad.
Mm.
Lucio now. We're getting into Lucio. I can't remember anything from Moira other than that. Lucio. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know anything about Lucio yet. All I know is just the things that. All I just know is the previous knowledge from other comps that he had. Use speed boost to get your team into positions quicker. To get themselves into good positions quicker. Don't. Your role as Lucio is to make sure that the enemy team doesn't get a superior position. Before than your team does, because if your team is basically is in a shitty position like 75% of the fight, then your Lucio is not doing this, is not using the speed boost right, or your team is just not positioning correctly. Your team should, if your team has a Lucio and theirs doesn't, your team should always have the advantage in positioning. So yeah. Um, Second thing, you lose whenever your team is not usually doing rotations, or your team is not like transporting or going for flanks just yet. Like say for instance, your team is being busy clumped up and trying to take care of the front or and all playing front line. Then your Lucio should be trying to focus on building barrier and getting healed up. Your Lucio also in a way is kind of like Moira. You basically try to perform your role where you heal your teammates, you keep them up, and you keep them alive. But also you try to increase your effectiveness. A bit more. Lucio is a bit more different than Moira because Lucio actually can do some threatening damage. He can actually like focus players in the back line. He can actually focus the healers in the back line sometimes, or even a DPS. He can actually get a lot of damage out and charges very pretty quickly, which is nice. Um, your Lucio should just like Sigma try to get try to get hits onto the people and pass their barrier. Okay, and if possible, try to shoot the people that don't have armor.
How
Well, then
aggressive should he
again,
be then?
Earth. Aggressive enough to where they can basically aggressive enough to where they can keep shooting the people and get lots of damage out, but not too aggressive to where they can get punished because they're like close face into because they're like fucking face to face close kind of thing. Like the Lucio has a bit of range, he has a bit of an escape route, and he knows how to pick his targets and when to go in. Because or like where to go in too. Because your Lucio can sometimes engage the enemy more closer, but he might not be able to engage the enemy at a certain angle if there's somebody with a CC ability guarding that place or
That
guarding that
angle.
angle. I mean, so yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Like, should he be going for? Because I know I was sitting in for one of my friends' VOD review and stuff.
if your team is more committed to playing the front line,
Mm.
like I remember when if your team is more committed to playing the front line, like say for instance your Sigma's playing front line, your Reaper's playing front line, you probably have like maybe even a Doomfist about to like also commit to the front line, then your Lucio is also going to focus on the front line. Your Lucio's playstyle, um, or your Lucio's commitment depends on what you're committing to. If you're basically committing to the front line, your Lucio commits heals, your Lucio commits heals, the amp abilities if needed, and speed boosts if needed for some weird reason. If needed for some reason, um, to basically commit into the fight. If your team decides to basically start developing their positions and start going for like off angles and flanks, then your Lucio would start supporting that too. Unless for some reason, what should we call it? Unless your Lucio also plays a nice oh shit factor, or like a nice oh shit ability. So if the enemy starts rushing your Orisa with their Lucio, then your Lucio
Okay.
can rush out. Like as that oh shit ability.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
can be
gotcha,
like that
gotcha.
oh shit moment. So
Okay.
that way he can get out. But since your Lucio is extremely mobile, he can not only be that oh shit factor for Orisa, but he can also still commit to even helping the Sigma get an off angle or flank
Mm.
because he can jump over walls, he can use speed boost, he can get from different places on the map very quickly. So he can help enable your Sigma to get to a nice flank or off angle quickly. Same with your Reaper or Doomfist. It's that good, and then he can immediately just rotate right back into the core. He could even like probably like sometimes he could even like maybe while he's in the back, he could even like grab more attention too. Like I said, if depending on the angle, if he's able to go in where he comes in, he'll be able to get nice damage from behind the shields, and he'll be able to charge his ultimate quickly, increasing his effectiveness. And then when his team needs him, he can wall ride to them when he needs them. And usually the Lucio plays more with the core, um, despite a lot of things.
Okay.
So yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I learned. Now, I granted most of this that I learned wasn't really from the 30-minute observation. Most of this was like pre-knowledge. It's just the
The
pre-knowledge I
culmination
learned
of
throughout the years.
30-minute
But then,
decision.
yeah,
Yeah.
the culmination of like knowledge I learned over the years. But they still apply even in this competition today. Um, hopefully I take this. Hopefully I kind of like snap out of it and take this a bit more seriously and actually start doing full on like 2 hour reviews maybe on like each hero and how they synergize together, and especially on the double barrier, how pro teams play it, how amateur teams play it. It depends. So pretty much now that I told you these basics, I know this is a lot to remember,
I've got it all
but
recorded, so it's all good.
yeah. So if anything, you basically can use this as like the basic fundamentals for how your team it should play double barrier. So like if you're basically recruiting brand new people, have them know what these basics are, have them go into the match, and then have them work the kinks out. Remember, never things are not going to be smooth. It's always going to be rocky. Be prepared for that. Do not tilt. Keep that PMA up, and be ready to lose. Be ready to lose and be ready to win. So yeah.
Okay.
Any questions so far that you have?
Well, the questions I was going to ask would be, for example, the Doa barrier. So obviously
Yeah.
you got that play, and again, that's assuming you're playing against a mirror matchup as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then for me, let's say I sensed something wasn't working with double barrier, but we still wanted to play double barrier. That I would then would like to have the knowledge of how to change the play style of double barrier to adjust towards what the enemy team might be running as a compositional attempt to counter. Let's say, for example, how should we play if they're playing dive, or how should we play if they're playing death ball or high poke comp, or if there's a wrecking ball involved, blah blah blah. But again, like you said, it's more basics. But if you have any knowledge to
I
tell me
do know
now,
this. Okay, I do have the knowledge about basically against dive heroes. So there's a lot of dive heroes. So first off, if you're gonna come up, this is the important thing to know. This is the important thing to know. What's a dive hero? Genji, Tracer, Hammond, Winston, very highly mobile abilities. Doomfist. Think of all the highly mobile characters that can get in and get out. Those are dive characters. Okay, when you basically go against characters like those that have that dive potential, um, your team usually wants to play clump together and play more peels and your team wants to play a bit more. How would you say a zoning style? So say for instance you're playing against an offensive, you're playing against dive and you guys are on defense. You guys basically want to defend the payload and zone away or punish anybody who overextends or over aggresses into your double barrier composition, because you guys have a lot of peel potential. You have Sigma, you have Doomfist, you have Reaper, you even have some offensive capabilities. Like I said, double barrier is extremely powerful. It can transpose. You guys can go from being an extremely defensive composition that completely negates all of Dive's abilities, and then while Dive is not being aggressive, then you can immediately transpose where Doomfist is already starting to develop his position. Reaper teleports somewhere into the high ground and is getting ready to drop down on somebody, and like your supports have extremely high survivability. You guys should not be able to die from dive, specifically because one, your Moira has Fade and she has Orb, so extremely high survivability. Your Lucio has Boop, also extremely high peel. Your Orisa has Fortify, very easy to survive from. The only one you should worry about from dive is Sigma, and maybe Doom if they have like some sort of anti Doom hero. Same with what call it Hammond. Like Hammond should not be able to affect that comp too much. Like the only thing he can really do is just like piss you guys off by booping you with his grapple, or hitting you with his pile driver. So yeah, pretty much when you're going against a lot. That's right. Even if you go against dive heroes that have like CC abilities, which as a team, you guys want to make sure that you don't let anybody die from those CC abilities, even if it was like maybe an ultimate sometimes maybe. Yeah, even if it was like an ultimate, you like have ultimates too. So like you don't want to, you don't you you want to make sure that if you're playing against a dive team, that you conserve your how would you say it? Your oh shit get out of there abilities, just in case they basically pull some shit like that, and then be ready to close in on them sometimes too. You guys even have, remember, you have a Sigma who has accretion, so he can punish a Winston if he can get inside the barrier. You guys can stun the Winston. Doomfist can kill the Winston by himself. Hammond can zone off Hammond can get zoned off by Doomfist. He like Hammond's even like it would be hard for Hammond to even like stay in the fight. He would only be allowed to like get in, like probably boot somebody, and if he tried to slam, Reaper can just punish that immediately. So there's a
So,
lot of things you can do against tanks.
so with
Genji and Tracer.
go on, go on. So far, just to summarize so far, what I've heard so far is with dive, you kind of want to be clumped together.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
You want to be clumped, but don't forget the things I said too.
Mm.
I'm showing you how to be clumped
Mhm.
and what you're being clumped for.
Mm.
Yeah. And then there's gonna be, remember, and there when you're basically playing against dive, there are going to be times where you don't have to be clumped, and that's when they're not being as threatened.
Mhm.
If they're not basically doing anything to threaten you guys just yet, and they're still working on themselves, they're starting to work on their position. You guys have the power to immediately go on the offense. Well, the DPS mainly. The tanks not really, or supports. The DPS can like, hey, we're gonna go fuck with you guys, and then the tanks probably the only thing that tanks could like do is just like maybe be support, you know?
Right.
Yeah, support from a distance. So yeah. Um, let's see. Any other questions
Not right
you
now, no.
have? Okay. Yeah. What you call it? Oh yeah, Sombra. If you guys do play against a Sombra and EMP, important fundamental for Lucio. If you guys are playing against Sombra or you guys are playing against Genji, um, and your Lucio has barrier, make sure that your Lucio is hiding away. Because
Yeah.
if you're and that when you're loose and that when the Genji does use blade or the Sombra does use EMP, that he doesn't get focused. Because oftentimes when those two have their abilities, they're gonna find that Lucio and they're gonna focus him because they know he has barrier and they don't want their ultimate to be countered.
Mm.
So you want to make sure that you enable your Lucio to be able to get that off. So I'll say this though. If the Genji basically flanks behind, tries to use Dragon Blade on the Lucio, trying to kill him first, that's gonna be quite often. I this one time I was looking at a VOD from a Diamond Lucio player, and he basically got destroyed by the Genji because he was positioned way too far up. The Genji knew he had barrier, and a Genji killed him first before he could finish his animation.
Right.
So that's why it's important for your Lucio to play back. Same thing, and obviously same thing with the EMP. What you would call it? Don't let your and also when your Lucio is kind of like playing more back. Sometimes there's gonna be times when your Lucio won't be as effective to like the main fight. He won't be able to contribute as much damage or maybe too much healing to the tank line because right now at the moment he's trying to play a role where he's right now playing a role where he doesn't get affected by the ultimate, so he can use his barrier. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention those for Lucio because that's honestly I don't see it's very uncommon. No, it's very rare that I would see Lucio players be able to properly execute. I mean, be properly positioned, so that way they don't get countered by those ultimates. It sucks.
Mm.
All right. Anything else you would like to mention, my bro?
Not right now, no. So I think it's just a case of just letting the team know what the basics are for each role, and then over time, if we lose matches, that's fine. Just get it reviewed, whatever it might be, and just iron out the kinks.
Also, just remember everything that I taught you here and all this knowledge that I gave to you right here and taught you, uh, you're not gonna when you do apply it, you're not going to be the best at it. So if your team says, no, this is trash, we shouldn't do it like this, which may call it, do tell them to be patient, because things will never go smooth.
No, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, make sure they're patient, and that they still keep trying to improve their make sure they keep trying to improve their basics and fundamentals. And if you feel like teammates want to add on to what I said, be open to it, because I definitely was not thorough in this, and I definitely wasn't that great in this. But what should we call it? If your teams feel like they probably want to add something in preparation before the scrim block, definitely be open to it. It could probably be a nice good add on to what I said too.
Well, if my guys are on today, just for a general mess around session, I think we'll just start implementing it now and just accept that if we, whatever the result might be, it's just working it out and get everybody on the same page.
Yeah. So basically, once you get a team scrim VOD review, I would definitely like to see a bird's eye perspective of you guys executing all the basics and fundamentals that I basically taught you here.
Right.
So yeah, do your best, man.
Sweet.
Good luck in your matches.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, man. Good luck later.
Thank you, bro.
I want to see some improved double barrier quality gameplay. The last time I saw it,
Well, I'll have to learn Sigma more, so I'm gonna look at the chrono thing that you
Yeah.
sent me, and then obviously you could VOD review
Yeah.
my Sigma specifically, then I can work on him and take it
Yeah.
from there.
Okay, I'll see you later, man.
Right, have a great day.
You too.